Okay, thanks for coming early in the morning to hear about India. It seems, I've been investing now in India for the last 10 years, and a lot has changed. Few of the people here, most of the people here I've had relationships with for almost that long a time. And so this feels like a conversation we would have pretty much once every 2-3 months when we're together, other than Azmil, who brings a perspective that I think would be exciting for everyone to share. So maybe Vinay, we'll start with you, talk a little bit about what you've built and why you're here.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Vinay Sanghi. I'm the founder of CarTrade.com. We started the company in 2010. We are an automotive online marketplace. So we started in 2010 as a used car focused company trying to build the used car ecosystem and helping customers buy used cars in India with a simple objective to make car buying simple for an Indian car consumer. And about 3 years later, in 2014, 2015, started looking at the new car industry and acquired a leading competitor, Carvale.com, and then merged the two companies. So we have a dominant market share in new car buying and used car buying in India. Just to give you some context, India sells 4 million used cars and 3 million new cars a year. We get about 16 million unique customers every month onto our platforms. Almost about 80% of all car buyers in India visit one of our platforms before they buy a car. Just to give you a little background of our shareholders, our investors, of course, Sumant and March Capital are invested in. They've been very helpful. Warburg Pincus is an investor. In fact, one of my investors is here too. Temasek is an investor, which is the government of Singapore. And JP Morgan is an investor. So that makes up our shareholder group. Some of the areas of future we're going to focus on, having got a large base of car consumers on our platform and 80% of all car buyers. Auto finance is a very big focus area for the future for us. So we want to disrupt auto finance or giving loans out for car buying in India. And of course, we also want to disrupt the car insurance industry. So this is some of the two focus areas for the next few years.
So, and we'll talk more about what makes the Indian ecosystem so different and what the potential opportunities lie there. And with that, Vasu, maybe a little bit about BillDesk.
Yeah, morning. But before we start on BillDesk, I'm feeling pretty special sitting on the same stage that the General and Mike were here yesterday.
Yeah.
That was an extremely...
That was very good.
Very good session, so it makes me feel special too.
If that's all it takes, we'll do it again.
Yeah, we are, and hopefully the session will go just as well. So my name is Vasu. I'm a co-founder of a company called BillDesk. It's an online payments company, an e-payments platform. What we essentially do as a business is to enable other enterprises and businesses to offer online payment and digital payment solutions to their customers. So we are not a direct-to-consumer facing brand, but we enable enterprises across various categories to allow their customers to make online payments. So that's a whole range catering from utilities, telcos, to e-commerce companies, to airlines. So if you were in India shopping on Amazon, you're pretty much using our platform. If you're buying an airline ticket, you're pretty much using the BillDesk platform. Chances are 8 times out of 10, you would be hitting the BillDesk platform when you transact online in India. While we'll do talk more about India, e-payments is right now the focus in India due to a lot of other developments in the country. There's a huge digital focus, especially on digital payments. And hopefully we'll talk about that later.
Great. Yeah. Rajan?
Hi, I'm Rajan Mehra. I'm the co-founder of Nirvana Ventures. We're an early stage technology fund. I've been investing and running businesses in the internet space in India since 1999. So we started out in the space when we had only 2 million users, and we're up to now 400 million users in India. It's been an exciting sort of last 4 years since we set up Nirvana. I also happen to sit on the board of both CarTrade and BillDesk companies that we're investors in.
And I happen to sit on your board, so that makes it all even. Azmil?
Yeah, my name is Tengku Azmil. I'm with Khazanah National, which is the strategic investment arm of the Malaysian government. We've been around for over 20 years. We're not the largest investment fund in Malaysia. In fact, we're not even the second largest, but we're probably the ones that do sort of the funkier type investments.
Which is India?
Which includes India, yeah. And lots of other places, including the US. Our fund size, we're about $35 billion, and our investments basically run a whole gamut of industries. I think it's probably easier to say what we don't do. We don't do natural resources. We don't do sort of the sin stuff, the gambling, alcohol, and so on, but we do just about everything else.
So that just takes a huge chunk of the US economy out of the equation if you don't do sin. But maybe for the audience's sake, give them a little bit of what Malaysia is like today, how big it is, and your mandate as to sort of think about where to put money to work.
Yeah, so when we were first created, the aim was really, we held what's seen as the typical old state-owned enterprises. So we owned, big chunks in the electricity utility company, the fixed line telco operator, the national airline, and these were very old state companies that used to be government-owned. The government put them into Khazanah. Just over 10 years ago, the government gave us a mandate to be more aggressive and more active shareholders, and that's when most of the people who are currently in Khazanah joined. We put in a transformation program and so on to really drive up the performance of these state-owned enterprises. And by and large, we've been quite successful, and that's actually helped bring our portfolio value up very significantly. And 10 years ago, 100% of our portfolio would have been just in Malaysia. Today, on a see-through basis, we're about 60% Malaysia and 40% outside Malaysia. And the proportion of investments that are outside Malaysia continues to increase over time. We opened our first overseas office in Beijing, I think it was 2008. We opened an office in Mumbai in 2009. And that was sort of where we were for a while. And then 3 years ago, we opened an office in San Francisco. We opened an office in Istanbul. And most recently, we opened an office in London. And the idea was that we were going to diversify our investments further out. We still have quite a big chunk of the core state-owned enterprises. That's still a key part of our portfolio. But we felt we really needed to go further afield. And in particular for technology investments, we are really doing a big move to increase that as a proportion of our portfolio. And the rationale was really, Malaysia is a very small country. We're about 30 million people. But we're in right.
That's almost as big as New Delhi in India.
Yes, just to put it in perspective. So we've felt, even for companies, successful companies under our stable, in a country of 30 million, there's only so far that you can go. So one of the things that we pushed was initially within Southeast Asia. So we've actually been initially very big investors into Indonesia. We've got companies that have gone into Thailand, into Philippines, and so on. And Malaysia being a very multicultural country, because of where things are, we've got about 60% of the indigenous Malay population, 30% ethnically Chinese, and 10% ethnically Indian. So we're really part of Asia. So the affinity with India and China is actually particularly strong. So we felt, as part of Asia, that's also where we want to be. And in terms of technology investments and really being part of the wider world, we really needed to be in that space.
And when you visit, you kind of understand how developed and how far they've come, and it's quite interesting, at least it was for me. But let's go through a few sort of slides that give you perspective on some data on where India is today and why it's interesting to talk about. So at least this is a slide I stole from Rajan, who's sitting here. It's one of the sort of one of the thought processes is, if when you hit the 20% of consumer or the population getting networked, you start seeing unbelievable opportunities start arising, and there's an inflection point where internet adoption continues to grow. Where are we today? The country is 1.3 billion people, about 1 billion mobile phone users, and 300 million of that have smartphones. So, and this rise has been pretty recent, and we'll talk a little bit more about what led to that and what the opportunities around that could be. And again, just perspective, if you just look at the mass of the population that is getting connected, it's as much as the G7 countries combined. So this is something it's very hard to ignore. Now, of course, there's many differences between India and Europe, of course, but India and China as well. And hopefully we'll provide you a perspective on that, and happy to take questions at the end if someone has them. So here, a little data on India and China. And there's more, and we'll talk about more. But let's just, focus on the ground as we think of where China is today and why it's, the last decade or so of the world's GDP has been driven by that economy. What's, Vinay, for your business, and you've spent some time in China, what's so different about what you had to do in India and China? And then maybe give people a little context of the US market for what you're doing, and then how you had to sort of create something different, similarities and differences.
Yeah, so I went to China last year, and actually I always tell people that unless you visited India, China, and the US, you've really not seen the world. And India and China today have close to about more than 30% of the world population. The visit to China was probably one of the best education experiences I've had. And one thing which stood out for me was just the scale of infrastructure. Just the kind of infrastructure they've built across railways, airports, roads, etc. But also the infrastructure they built in their businesses. So I was told that the leading food delivery company delivered 10 million orders a day. So it's quite staggering to know that they deliver 10 million orders per day. And therefore, it is an education experience, how to run the processes, system, payments, etc., etc. When you look at the auto industry, the competitive company in China employed more than 15,000 people. And you got to remember, China sells 17 million cars a year, new cars a year, which is the probably largest car market in the world, neck to neck with the US, which is also about 17 million cars a year. India is at about 3 million cars a year for new cars today, 4 million for used. So China is about 5 times India in terms of car sales. We expect India to reach China in the next 7 to 10 years in terms of car sales. With the current growth rates and the penetration. So India has 17 cars per 1,000 people today. China has got 160 cars per 1,000 people. So we expect with the car penetration to the population growing, we'll reach China in the next 7 to 10 years. But what stood out for me and the opportunity which I looked at is the infrastructure built in the auto industry in China. So just the retailing infrastructure, technology, software, systems at dealerships, connectivity between dealerships and platforms, connectivity between banks and consumers, connectivity between insurance companies and consumers.
So a lot of things, so just to put in context, a lot of things in the US you take for granted just never existed in that part of the world. So when Vinay talks about connecting dealers to an online platform, it literally means they did not have a computer within a dealership. So you have to start at that level. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so it's really connecting. So dealers in India are really 200 square feet showrooms with 10 cars on the road in front, with no computer system. So I also think the Indian SME or the Indian small businesses have skipped the whole computer generation and moved straight to smartphones. All dealers who are associated with us use a point of sale software or a system on a mobile device. They don't use computers. Even now, they don't use computers. So I think what we found and what the learning from China was is we've got to build the infrastructure, connectivity with dealers and other stakeholders. And that would help us scale our business. And that's a lot of what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years is connect dealers to CarTrade, connect banks to CarTrade, connect insurance companies to CarTrade, so we can then connect with consumers and improve our product offering.
So what it means, so it's a lot of work, and now the company is what, 7 years old?
The company is about 6.5 years old, yeah.
And it took 5 years of infrastructure building before they can turn the lights on to try and start making money off of that. And it takes some patience and it takes a lot of work, and you need the capacity and capabilities to go out and do that. So it's very hard for someone to just fly in from, say, Europe or the US and try and replicate the business in those environments. That the infrastructure doesn't exist. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, so maybe Vasu, from your perspective, and maybe given your business, China is interesting, and everyone talks about Alibaba and Financial and WeChat and WePay and all of that. But also the US, which is kind of sitting on technologies and systems that are now 2-3 decades old. Like, what is it that you do differently? What did you have to do differently?
Yeah, but I first want to pick a few points about India versus China. Invariably, there is a comparison that's always done between India and China, and China is kind of held up as a mirror of what potentially India could do. But we've been in the internet space for 15 years, and I'll tell you one thing that I've seen happen in India. The positioning of India, or what works for India, or how is it similar to the US market or Chinese market, is a perception that's first and foremost driven by providers of capital, and then subsequently analysts who kind of define how the market can grow. So when we started in 2000, and China wasn't the internet powerhouse that it is today recognized as, the question that typically we faced from investors was, we don't understand the business. We understand India is different. Tell us what does it compare to in the US? Can you tell us what BillDesk does? Which is the company in the US that does that? And as long as you couldn't establish a like-to-like comparison, it didn't work very well in the mindsets of the capital, which was primarily coming from the US in those days. A lot of Indian companies that were set up between the first 5 years, let's say of 2000 to 2005 or 2006, have faded away primarily because they all lacked capital. And there was only one fundamental reason. They could not establish a positioning in the minds of the capital providers as to how their model was going to evolve. What helped subsequently was China, because of its own reasons, primarily I would think of it as being protectionist measures of allowing their companies within China to grow. You had large companies coming out of China. And then it became easy for everyone to say, India is going to mirror the way China is going. The similarities were then visible to say, you have X population, India has Y population, India lags so many years behind China, and therefore, India invariably will mirror the way China will go. So even today, when one thinks of India and the metrics by which one measures or the comparatives, those are similar reasons. The reasons that drive that positioning is, to my mind, largely the way capital wants to perceive it. I say that because...
Oh, hang on one second. This is capital right here. Do you agree with him?
Let me finish.
No. You tell him now.
I'll tell you what the difference is.
I have to stop him from this path. I don't know where he's going.
The two parts to it, right? I think building a business in India is far more difficult than China for 2 or 3 reasons. One, all the points that Vinay made are valid, right? Or the points that you made, that India has a basic infrastructure problem. So what you have as an entrepreneur to solve, there's a larger playground to solve for it. There's a larger value benefit that you can capture. But this is not hidden knowledge, right? Like I'm assuming when Alibaba was built, they had a lead time before the number 2 player caught up with them, the amount of capital that they had. Right now in India, or even let's say 5 years ago, you had a set of entrepreneurs who were all pitching for capital saying, this is going to be the next China. This is the next opportunity. If you missed out China, this is your new market. And we are all going to create similar sized companies. So the big difference in India is you have a hyper-competitive nation with equal capital availability to 3 or 4 large providers. So that itself changes the dynamics. It's, in a sense, self-fulfilling as a prophecy, saying 4 people believe they can all become the Alibaba of India. And therefore, all are going to burn capital at the same rate. And they need to figure out, will they gain the market shares? By the time Alibaba in China had significant competition, they were already at a scale of either market share or the volume they were processing, which is more than what all the Indian companies put together even process today. So I think that's one significant difference. Therefore, what it translates to is the challenges of building businesses in India are going to be different. And therefore, while at a macro level, the narrative might be similar in terms of how it's going to play out, I think what one needs to watch out is the time frame it will take and at what cost this business get built.
I think there's many challenges. And Rajan was, when I met him, running eBay in India. And I think for the audience's benefit, maybe giving them a little insight into how eBay in that part of the world compares to eBay here, even at that time, now, would be kind of interesting. It's very different. And we'll talk a little bit more about the capital availability and challenges as we go through. And I'm sure Azmil has a point of view on where he's going to deploy money from his group over the next coming years that I'd love to get some insight into.
Sure.
And help with.
Yeah, so, I couldn't agree more with Vasu and Vinay. It's very hard to build businesses in India, but if you do invest right, it can be very profitable. So Vinay started out his company in 2010. They built it really quickly. It's worth close to $500 million now. Vasu started out in early 2000. Here's a company that's over $1 billion in value. So it can be very profitable to build big business. It's very hard and takes a little longer than it would take in China and the United States. I think the really interesting thing about India at this stage is the number of young people we have. There's, depending on which number you take, 400 million millennials, close to 800 million people below the age of 30. And all of these people are digital natives whose consumption habits start on the mobile device. And this is actually a fascinating trend because at the same stage of growth for China, we have 2x the wallet share of spend in the millennials that the Chinese do. Now,
define what does that mean? That means that Are people spending twice?
No, so the per capita income of the Indian is significantly less than the Chinese. However, the share of wallet spent from the Indian digital consumer is already 2x what it was in China 5 years ago. Okay. So if you think about the relative share of spending on digital, it's actually very significant. And we think this trend accentuates as we move forward because the relative convenience afforded by the internet, the absence of infrastructure, also means that you leapfrog retail, you leapfrog other systems that sort of were built out in other countries. So there is no Walmart in India, but you will have the Amazon of India.
And so I think Amazon of India seems to be Amazon.
Well, it does, and you know, it'll be interesting to see how that market plays out because there's regulation that we haven't contended with yet, which will...
So the one, I think, key takeaway here that India is not a protectionist as much as China is economy, and that meant that the Facebook of India is Facebook and the Google of India is Google, and you know, 10 years ago, the email in India was Hotmail, and now it's Google Mail, and so there is that inherent difficulty for homegrown businesses to compete with people who have perfected their processes and equations of economics and have then bringing it to the country if they can partner with local players where the infrastructure can be
But Sumant, you know, let me tell you, know, when eBay acquired Bazi in 2004.
So Bazi was your company.
Yeah, so this is a company that we started in 2000. Actually, I came to be acquired by Bazi, but yeah. And eBay was the dominant market leader. Bazi was the dominant market leader. eBay came, acquired the company, and it had market leadership till 2009. However, the focus was to build in an organized, profitable manner. To Vasu's point, you had capital which showed up, which said this market's a whole lot more, was willing to invest a lot more. And today, the winner is...
It looks foolish. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So Azmil, do you agree with what you're hearing? And how much of this is relevant to you as you look at allocation of capital, which I'm presuming you guys do pretty regularly, and think about economies?
Yeah, so for us, India and both India and China feature quite prominently in terms of where we look at.
It's 40% of the Malaysian population.
Exactly, and the main reason really is that, you know, the three large areas, China, India, and Southeast Asia, it's really where we are, and this is really the area that we know best. Yes, we do have an office in San Francisco, and an office in Istanbul, and one in London, and we'll continue to invest there. But Asia is really where the heart is, and I think Asia is really the area that we are in, and that's what we understand best. You know, maybe if I characterize as a capital provider in India, what it feels like. I was in Delhi many years ago, and I had some time, so I decided let's go to Taj Mahal because I haven't been there before.
The new road or the old road?
I think I can't remember.
If it was the old road, you would have remembered.
Maybe it was.
Because it's narrowly avoiding death.
So the journey was, you know, you got in the car, and it was bumpy as hell.
Yeah.
Right?
Old road.
Every now and then, you'd see a lorry lying overturned on the side of the road, and you're trying to overtake somebody. A lorry, you know, usually
another car coming in.
Are just randomly swerving right and left. So by the time you get there, you know, your back hurts, you're a bit grumpy, but then you get to Taj Mahal and you go, oh my God, this is great. Right? So being an investor in India sort of feels a little bit like that.
That's well said.
Yeah. Superb. So the India journey...
I'm going to use that one.
Yeah. So for us, you know, we've been in India for quite a number of years, and we've been profitable in India, but it hasn't been a smooth journey by any means. And I think we learned the hard way what not to do. I think we learned after the first few years it's probably best if you don't get into investments which require government approval to move forward. And the difference is with China, it's not necessarily that China is more open and less protectionist. It's just that China is very clear. So, for example, in healthcare, right? We're very interested in healthcare. You know, the Chinese government goes, yes, we need more healthcare. We need to do more for the people. We need foreign capital. But they're very clear.
But that's the difference between a democracy that is multi-party versus a country that is run by iron fist.
Yes and no. Yes and no. So I think what China's done well is they've got, so they're very clear, okay, this part are for domestic only. Foreigners don't come. This part, we welcome you with open arms.
Yeah.
And then because it's China, there's a third part where in theory, foreigners can come in, but in practice, everyone knows only the Chinese SOEs are going to come in.
But you heard yesterday from, I don't know if you were paying attention with Mike Milken and Petraeus' conversation, that more than 60% of the Chinese that have more than $1.5 million want to move out of China, want to get their money out of China. And there's definitely a constant fear of, quote unquote, the government in that.
There is, but I think the difference is the government is very clear what you can and cannot do.
Till they're different, till they change the laws.
Yes, but typically I think there's some long-term thinking there. With India, it's not very clear. And typically, you find out hard way.
Nothing is clear.
You find out the hard way what foreigners shouldn't have really come in.
But then you have ways to solve it, because India always has a system that you can figure out. It takes a little time, but you have people who can help you.
Yes, that's why you get a bad back and you're a little bit grumpy.
Yes.
But you still make money. You still make money at the end of the day.
So anyway, look, the slide that's up there right now shows what has driven the world's economy for the last decade or so. It's been China's unbelievable double-digit growth of the GDP, which has been driven by what Vinay was talking about, infrastructure spending, and of course, the manufacturing and exports. In the case of India, we don't have a manufacturing economy in the country and the growth. But if India does continue to grow the way it's growing, which it should, given that I learned this morning that our Prime Minister now has even a stronger mandate to go out and push his reforms, or I don't know whether you call them reforms or autocratic agenda through, it can. But one thing we can I'd like to focus on a little bit is we keep talking about this multi-hundred million middle class that exists in those two countries. That's the backbone of consumption or spending. And I think the data, this data came from a Goldman Sachs report, shows that India has a long way to go. So anyway, Rajan, to your point, wallet share versus getting to a point where that's meaningful. Like, how the heck do you make money in India?
So I think it's a good point, and we look at a few companies as good examples of how to think about cost structure in India versus the United States, China, Japan. If you look at the telecom space in India, the average revenue per telecom subscriber is about $4. If you look at comparable number in the United States, it's about $40. Japan, very similar. But if you look at the consumer base of India's largest telco, Airtel, it's about 300 million consumers. Now, you compare the EBITDA margin of Airtel, it's at 35%. And you take the most 35% in India, and you take the most profitable US carriers and Japanese carriers, they're 35%. Although their ARPUs are 10x ours. Is that
a nature of just being newer, so you have a better?
No, it is a function of cost architecture. So a lot of people set up US-style cost structures for Indian-style average revenue per user. And that is a surefire way to lose money in India. And I think Vasu and BillDesk are a great example of a company that's in a reasonably commoditized industry that have extracted value.
Don't say that loud.
Well, I mean, you could argue it's commoditized unless you've architected it right.
As much as telecom is. So Vasu, what do you think of that point? Can you make money in India? You are, but can you please make money?
The key difference is this. In a market like the US, making money is good. In a market like India, making money is not seen as good. It first begins with that perspective. It draws focus. A profitable company, which is in the unlisted space, the listed companies, I think those are listed on the exchanges, follow the same rules, right? People want to see quarter-on-quarter growth. But the way the market, especially segments that are regulated, right? There is a focus on why is there so much margin on the table, why are manufacturers of product making that big a margin. So it's not necessarily the best position. And in businesses like ours, which is payments, which is in the focus, whether it's the financial regulator or the government, they do have a point of view on what is the amount of margin you should make. So India is the only country where in electronic payment transactions, there is a regulatory intervention which says you cannot charge more than this of the merchant. It does not matter what quality of service you provide or what range of services you provide. There is a cap that what you can charge the merchant. And that, at the scale India is, just to give you a sense, if you would think of digital payments and if you broadly put a number as India being at maybe 1/5 or 1/10 the scale of what happens, let's say, in the US, the cap of pricing in India is 1/4 what the US has today. So it's the maximum you can charge a merchant in India is, let's say, 1%, whereas an average take rate here would typically be 2.5 to 3%, right? So a couple of things that happen in India, which is a function of many things. One, there's a mix of various things, right? Capital to interventions to hyper-competitiveness. The revenue bar is already lowered. So now you have to adjust costs such that you still are making that margin. So to Rajan's point, this is the way Airtel would think of it. If the max I can make is $4, but globally, because I'm going to raise capital in other markets, I'm going to be measured on my global peers, and how do I get to a 35% margin? How do I manage cost such that I keep to a dollar?
And people have done a great job of that.
It depends. I mean, if I argue as a global citizen, I would make a case for the fact that it is therefore perhaps going to be a little difficult to build a great quality company out, or a research-focused or innovation-focused company out.
You don't have money to invest,
focus, right? So that's going to be the one challenge India has to figure out.
So this affects your business, Vinay, because at the end of the day, people's ability to buy a car depends on how much they can earn, right? So what do you think of this curve and the difference between India and China, and maybe even touch upon sort of the half a car business?
So I want to add one thing to what Vasu's saying. I think one thing about India is customers or consumers in India want world-class products, but they want to pay Indian prices. And I think when you start a business in India, you've got to be very conscious about building the cost architecture so you can make money and you can manage your unit economics. But at the same time, you can't compromise on the quality of service you deliver. I think we do have an advantage in India on cost, I think primarily because the cost of labor versus any other country in the world. And I think when you look at our own business, we certify, we're the largest car certification company in India. And when we certify a car, it costs us $2 for a person to go and check a car and certify the car. In the US, that same service would cost $100. And I think so we inherently have a cost advantage. But we do, when we build businesses, we do think of cost architecture and our unit economics so that we know eventually we're going to have to deliver a very high quality of service at a very Indian price. I think that's one thing as a given as a business in India. When we look at really the average earnings of a household and how it impacts car sales, India is the largest. This data clearly shows why. India is the largest motorcycle market in the world. We sell about 12 to 14 million motorcycles a year, and I think public transport's pretty weak, and a lot of people for commuting use motorcycles.
Can this urban mass, the $3,000 per an average, afford a motorcycle?
They're all motorcycle users. In fact, 95% of motorcycles sold are financed. So most of them are buying motorcycles at an EMI of, I don't know, maybe $10 a month and managing their transport and commuting from one place to the other place.
And you can see 4 or 5 people on a motorcycle at any given time.
An average motorcycle carries at least 4 people. So that is India. So that's why motorcycle sales are so high. What in the car industry, and by the way, we also own the largest bike platform in India, motorcycle platform called Bike Wale. But what we're all betting on is this number is going to keep on increasing with the GDP growth rate of 7%.
So the slide before that curve that takes India up to a place in the next 20 years where the consumption's more mirror, or the income more mirrors
China. And then what's going to happen is this 18 cars per 1,000 people will probably go to 40 cars or 50 cars or 60 cars per 1,000 people. And that's when we see this huge growth in the Indian auto industry.
And Vasu, you disagree?
No, but I think it highlights the point that as long as whether people in India or outside think of India as a market of cost advantage, that becomes a natural focus. So if an organization says, look, I am the best research organization, I am the best design company, or I produce whatever is the focus tends to become the competitive advantage because that's what you're working towards. And I think Vinay makes a great point. The country is obsessed and positioning-wise to focus on saying we are a nation which has a cost advantage. Automatically, that gets focus on cost. So companies that get built, right? And you'd see the struggle that the e-commerce companies are going to go through. That balance is something that the Indian companies need to find. And I think that will change. That will
I
change.
think that's true, but I think so it is true, we have not seen a innovative world-class company out of India yet. You have seen global companies, which are not necessarily in the spaces we invest in, but outside of that, that have some history and have some tradition and have some expertise that they're bringing out into the world. So Tata is being one, the big conglomerates, and you can see now even Airtel getting its cellular service and going into Africa and things like that. So they're starting to happen.
Yeah, so what India offers is scale, right? And scale comes with population. You have 1.3 billion population. You have so many problems to solve. There is, to the points made earlier, you have legacy infrastructure and legacy issues that need to be bypassed or good.
Exactly.
So
and you can
enormous
you can
opportunity,
export
enormous
that.
scale.
Yeah. I mean, for you, what you guys do at the price point that you do it and make money at would completely transform the US businesses on payments if you could bring it in here.
True.
Right? So let's do that. There's a, the last 12 months has been exceptionally, I'd say, exciting and nerve-wracking in India as well. And we've been experiencing a political agenda that is very populist, but experiencing a political agenda that's driving the country into the digital age. And so I thought we'll pick these 3 topics and maybe have for next 5-7 minutes discuss them because they're very meaningful to how businesses have to respond / take advantage of what's going on. And maybe Azmil, from your point of view, from the outside, when you see the news and the media, when you see these things happen, like demonetization or the launch of Reliance's cell phone service, like, what do you guys think?
Well, it certainly makes watching India very interesting, right? Demonetization was, I think, a huge, probably more of a shock if you're in India than if you're not. But it was, depending on how you look at it, either bold or foolhardy, probably.
Actually, let me explain demonetization for 1 second. There were 2 currency notes in India, the 500 rupee note and 1,000 rupee notes. It translates to about $12 at the high end and $6 at the low end.
But purchasing power, you would think of it as $100 and $50.
Yeah, similar to 100. And then suddenly overnight they were made, they're not valid tender. So you've got 2 months, go to the bank, change them, and you had only limited amount of cash you could withdraw because new notes just had not been printed. There was just not enough to give people cash for their daily needs. So that was demonetization. The only reason why I think people in this country didn't hear more about it is that it happened on the same day Donald Trump became president. That's this news disparity, and I was like, wow, couldn't have timed it better. But now go ahead, Azmil.
Yeah, lightning does strike twice. Different places.
And the notes that were made non-legal tender was 85% of total circulation. It's huge. But I think, so for me, and it was interesting hearing all 3 of you talk about it. You were saying that there isn't a lot of sort of global leading innovation coming out of India. But actually, to me, there's still a lot of innovation. If you look at what CarTrade's done, what BillDesk has done, that cost structure to actually serve, to your previous slide, you actually need to be very creative and very innovative to actually be able to deliver that. So we have a joint venture that we've done with Davita that looks to do dialysis in Asia, and they have a strong presence in India. In the US, 1 round of dialysis will cost you $250. In India, maybe you can get 20. And if you ask anyone here, can you make money with $20 per dialysis, they'll say it's absolutely impossible. But there are people who are doing that today in India and making money. So it's a different sort of innovation.
Yes.
But I still consider that innovation nonetheless.
What I meant is it hasn't been exported out of India and gone into and competed in other nations.
Absolutely. So I think, with all this stuff, and who would have thought that somebody would launch, and say, I'm going to give free data to people, and only now just, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, so catch up people on what Azmil was talking about. Reliance, which is a large Indian conglomerate, launched their 4G service and said it's free for the first 3-4 months. And unlike, it's probably the fastest adoption of any consumer technology in the world. 100 million people signed up and took those phones and used that service now in 5 months. And so now they're starting to charge for it, but sorry, go ahead.
So still like $1.
$1.50, and then you have bands and you can go, but at $1.50 they're going to make money per month on a cellular subscriber.
I think only in India can you see that. And I think only in India can somebody possibly make that work.
Yeah.
is absolutely crazy anywhere else. But I actually think it may work just simply because I've seen sort of the ingenuity of how you would do things in India.
And as we talked about, you need a guy like Mukesh Ambani who can line up $10 billion and invest it over the last half a decade or 7 to 10 years, and not a single dollar of revenue in that entire time. And so if you can do that, you can do something so innovative and I don't even know if what the right way may be destructive of the cell phone industry, right? Vinay, what do you think of demonetization, and what did that open up or destroy for you?
So when I look at this slide, and then when investors say internet companies are overvalued, I laugh because this slide really talks about what digitization, what's going to happen to India in the next 5 years. Demonetization basically means that, in fact, the original reason the government demonetized the 500 rupee and 1,000 rupee note was to curb corruption and terrorism. I think the biggest benefits of this is digitization, because during that period of 2 to 3 months when money was not available, consumers were forced to get onto a digital platform or get a credit card and make payments. A company like ours, where dealers subscribe and pay us every month for subscriptions, we had 0% of our payments coming through a digital source 4 months ago. Today, over 40% of our dealers pay through a digital means.
Through your wallet.
Through our wallet. So it's leapfrogged the entire digital payment business in India. It's leapfrogged the adoption of digital. When you look at Reliance Jio, connectivity in small towns is always a concern, and I think what they're looking to do is solve connectivity across the length and breadth of India. Clearly, when we look at companies like ours, 70% of our customers come to us through a mobile device. We're a mobile-first company, so we have more engineers, more programmers, more product people on our mobile applications than for desktop computers. So when you look at this whole package on this slide, if you're a digital company in India, you can't be but smiling. I think it's a huge, huge opportunity for
Let's also touch upon the third sort of development, which is the adoption of this digital identity, which is what this is. It gives everybody in India a smart card, a smart chip in a card, and now have a digital PIN number. Someone can be identified with their cell phone and that number. And maybe Vasu, quickly touch upon what that has done and could do to businesses like yours.
So broadly, what as a concept it does is because India didn't have the concept, let's say, social security or a unique way of identifying an individual, over the last 5 years, the earlier government and now the current government have focused on enabling a digital identity based on biometrics for an individual. That they're now taking to the business arena to say, for each of your business transactions, whether it's payments or any other way of identifying a customer, you don't need to go through any other rails. Connect directly to the government database for identifying the individual, and to the extent the digital identity is linked to the bank account or any other account of the customer, you can directly transact.
It's verification.
Authentication,
verification.
So from to Vinay's point, I think from any business that's building a digital payments business in India, it's great news because it now gives you a certain set of rails upon which to build your business. But like every good thing, it comes with a slightly bad chart to it. What it does, and that's a point we discussed earlier, that India is going to bypass and leapfrog some of the hurdles that traditionally other markets have had to face in such a fast manner, that the opportunities to create wealth in this segment. So in India now, there's no point building authentication solutions. The rest of the world could focus. It doesn't. So that segment is gone. So now you need to focus on, given these methods exist, what else do you build?
So that's a good point to segue into the next slide. In investment chaos and now disappearance of easy money, like what has that done?
So I think the way to think about this is think about what's happened in India over the last 60 years. It took India all of 60 years to make $1 trillion of GDP. It then took India 10 years to get its second $1 trillion of GDP. And it'll take us just another 5 years to get another $1 trillion. So if you look at all the tailwinds that we've been discussing so far, they're very positive. I think the consumer internet space itself saw a little froth in 15 and 16. And we're starting to see some of this play out now. So the Amazon of India or the sort of aspiring eBay of India went out and spent ahead of the market, and they're normalizing. But we think what this does is it allows for companies like BillDesk, CarTrade, that have been financially prudent to build sound architectures to actually emerge a lot stronger, because you had $15 billion invested in 4,000 companies over the last 5 years. We think about 100 of those have become meaningful companies, and we think 20 or 30 of them create disproportionate
And would you say that the last 2 years was driven by a few players that had access to almost free money? Like, what was the dynamic and what is it now?
See, I think the dynamic was the macro story was understood by lots of investors. There was a lot of global liquidities, sloshing around.
Places looking for growth.
Yeah. And it showed up in the market. I think it's playing through the system. I think we have another year worth of pain, and then sort of a lot of the companies that survive emerge a lot stronger.
All right, it seems we've run out of time. I just wanted to leave one thought with you. Most people, when they think of India, think of IT outsourcing and H-1B visas, and that's been in the news a lot these days. But as a market, that country has developed very well. I think the next decade is going to show even more strength. As Azmil said, it is quite a bumpy ride, but when you get there, it's worth the effort. At least that's what I've been telling my investors.
We agree.
Yeah, and if we can answer any questions, we'll be around. Happy to talk about it. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.